Welcome to this episode of the KPW podcast, and I'm KPW. Now, today we have with us Brad Englert, the founder of Brad Englert Advisory and author of Spheres of Influence. The full title of the book is Spheres of Influence: How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationships. It's published by Fast Company Press, and it's an Amazon bestseller in three key business categories. The book is a must read for emerging leaders looking to develop the skill of building effective, enduring business relationships, both within and outside their organizations. Brad, welcome to the program.
Thanks for inviting me.
Brad, I'm excited to talk with you about your book, Spheres of Influence, in particular, what some of the key teachings are. But before that, would you be able to give our listeners a little bit about your story and your background and give us some context that way?
Sure. I was with Accenture for 22 years and 10 years as a partner. My practice area was higher education, so my clients were Ohio State, Michigan, University of Illinois, Columbia, Vanderbilt, Cal State. So the big publics, big privates, and happily retired from the firm. And about 2 years later, I got a call from my alma mater, the University of Texas at Austin, and they needed an IT strategy. So they asked me to help. And starting in October, hour a week pro bono, turned into half-time employee by March and full-time by June. And I was the chief information officer for 7 years.
We're speaking with Brad Englert, the author of Spheres of Influence. Now, of course, we like people to pick up this book, and we also want to help out young professionals, younger listeners at the same time. So let's dive into some specifics here. Brad, in the first chapter, Relationships with the Boss, there were some great points that you made. And I want to touch on this one, that what is the first conversation you believe that everyone should have with a new boss, and why does it matter?
Well, I think the most important thing to know is what their goals and aspirations are. What is your boss trying to achieve? And then ask yourself, what can you do to help them achieve those goals? Because if you help them be successful, you will be successful.
Now, I think that there are some managers who won't or don't communicate clearly. And I think it happens more often than not. Even situations where maybe managers will intentionally ignore you or unknowingly ignore you for whatever reason, basically not communicate. So what's your advice for working with a manager who does not or will not communicate clearly?
Well, what I would do is set up a meeting with them one-on-one, uh, usually once a week for 30 minutes. And prior to those discussions, I would put an agenda together, and the agenda would cover uh, the priorities I'm working on. It would cover any issues I have that I need some help with. And I always try to have a discussion with them so the expectations are clearly set. And just follow up the next week. Here's what I said I was going to do. This is what I did. Um, and just try to frame the discussion that way.
Now, Brad, there are some interesting discussion points about managing expectations, including saying, whoa. So, can you share with our listeners the importance of managing expectations? And what does saying whoa sound like in a real conversation?
So I had this partner who was this type A personality, very demanding. Everything always sounded urgent. And one evening, I was trying to leave the office on time to meet my wife for dinner. And literally 5 o'clock, the phone rings and it's the partner. And she says, Brad, I need a white paper. And I literally said, whoa. And I was a little nervous at first because, but I knew if I said, whoa, no, then she'd get upset at me. But by saying whoa, I was able to better understand what she wanted. And so my first question was, well, when do you need this by? It sounded like immediately. And she says, oh, let me check my calendar. I meet with a client in 2 weeks. Okay. How many pages do you want this white paper to be? 3 pages. I was thinking 10. Do you have an example of a white paper that I could look at and model? Yeah, yeah. I asked David. I did one 10 years ago on XYZ Corporation. Well, guess what? I went home and I had dinner with my wife. Now, before I learned to say whoa, I would have stayed up all night working on a 10-page white paper, delivered it the next day, and get yelled at for not meeting her expectations. So it was really a lose, lose, lose situation. After I learned to say, whoa, I never canceled a vacation. I never missed a training. I never missed a school play. Didn't miss going to the doctor because I was able to set and manage those expectations. And that works with customers and others.
Is there an example where it worked with a customer when you said whoa?
Yes, I was invited to lead this very large transformation project at a Research One university in the Midwest, and I was having lunch with the CFO and the provost. And this was, just before the holidays, so about November. And I said, I know we can be successful. I'd love to lead this project for you. However, next summer, I have a long-standing vacation plan to Australia. And I was supposed to go last year. It was my 25th high school reunion. I was an exchange student there, and I had to cancel it because of work. So it's very important for me to take my family. We already had the passports, we have the plane ticket spot, but it's very important for me to do this. And they said, well, sure, yeah, not a problem. And um, it got to be March. We hit our first milestone. Things were going well. Got to be April. Things are going well. In May, we're meeting with months a month with the president, provost, CFO, and I was giving the status report. And I said, Mr. President, just so you remind you, as I have the last 3 months, that I'm going to be out next month on a vacation to Australia. And his hand started shaking. And he was nervous of me leaving at this juncture. And I kind of, in slow motion, was canceling my vacation. Whoa! And the chief financial officer and provost stopped me and said, Brad, just let us talk. Mr. President, when Brad joined us in November, he talked about this long-standing vacation. It's important to him and his family, and we committed to let him go. So we should uphold our commitment. And he says, Diane's going to be in charge while he's gone, and it's a good time to go. We should let him go. So they let me go, and Diane did a great job. I didn't check my email, I didn't check voicemail or anything. And literally 10 years later, I'm back in that Midwestern city having dinner with the chief financial officer, his wife, and my wife. And we talked about that situation. And he goes, Brad, when you were gone, the provost and I were scared to death, but they were committed to let me go. And, that's why they were my best client ever. They just, held up to their commitments.
That's fabulous. We're speaking with Brad Englert, author of Spheres of Influence. It's an Amazon bestseller in three key business categories. And want also to ask you, Brad, you mentioned in the book that you used a football analogy about a head coach, defensive coordinator, and offensive coordinator, which I found to be quite interesting. So if you can let us know about that, or let the listeners know about that, and also what can younger professionals do when they find themselves in stuck in a dynamic where a peer seems to be having more influence over the boss.
Uh, yeah, so I had a peer um, at the university who thought he could run information technology, which was my responsibility. And but the problem was I was the new guy. I was new to the campus, and he had been there for 15 years. And one thing I noticed was I would get these emails from the boss directing me to do things that were clearly written by my peer, not the boss. And how did I know this? Because I run the IT, so I check the calendar and I see that this email from the boss came 1 minute after they had their one-on-one meeting. And two, the boss always sent emails from his phone, so there's no subject matter, and they were very curt and short. Well, my peer had clouds of words, just and so I just knew it was coming from him, and it's like I can't work that way. So in my one-on-one with the boss, um, I realized that he was a football fan. I was a college football fan. So I said, okay, boss, you're the head coach. And I actually got a piece of paper out, drew three heads, put headsets on with wires connecting the two or the three. And I said, okay, you're the boss, you're the head coach. I'm your new defensive coordinator. I'm responsible for my organization. You have your long-standing offensive coordinator, who you worked with for 15 years. When I get orders from him through your headset, then you don't need me anymore. And what I need you to do for me to be successful is for you to hold me accountable for the defense, my organization, hold him accountable for the offense accounting, and we'll get we'll get along much better. And I just can't work with getting orders from him through your headset. And he just was kind of surprised. And because I don't think he was really conscious of doing that. Basically, he was being manipulated by this guy, my peer. And he actually thanked me for being frank and open about it. And, if he didn't change, I was going to quit. And so he didn't want me to quit. So he changed. So my advice to the listeners is you need to have the courage to say something. I had a guy I was talking with, and he worked in a company and had a great relationship with the boss until 1 week or two, the boss was treating him differently and kind of boxing him out and not listening to him. And he'd he finally got some time on the boss's calendar and said, "Did I do something wrong? You know, I don't know why you've changed. We've been working well together for 2 years." And the boss kind of was shaken and he goes, "Oh, um, I have trouble at home. I didn't realize it was affecting me here at work." Now, if that guy didn't have the courage to ask his boss, he would have suffered in silence. He probably would have quit. And it turned out that the boss recognized the behavior, corrected it, and they went on to have a great relationship after that. But you have to have the courage to use your words.
So it's important to also not just to communicate, but also know your boss well enough because you brought up the football analogy with him because he was a big football fan and he
Hmm.
understood based on what you were explaining. That's outstanding. I'd like to jump right into the chapter about relationships with all of your staff. There was a
Hmm.
story about handling conflict and misconduct. That was a story with George and Maggie in the book. And that story, quick and structured, action made a big difference. I'd like to share a story with you about a longtime employee creating an uncomfortable and hostile work environment, where I have had experience working in a school where the director regularly shouts at the administrative staff and the students when things did not go his way, like the stapler is out of staples, or the printer does not print things out, or like the computer is not working. And there's always yelling, and there was a hostile environment. What would you say to a leader who believes that shouting and intimidation is an acceptable way to get results, and what long-term effects can that kind of behavior have on staff and students in this case?
Well, it's demoralizing, it's debilitating. Um, it's really doing a disservice to your organization because you're not allowing people to have a safe environment to live in and work in. So it's really not successful in the long run. You cannot beat the troops until the morale improves. And people leave. They don't like it, or they just, you know, take it. And that's really not fair to them. You know, I would hope that there would be a way to communicate to this person, you know, how, you know, debilitating it is, but, um, or at least someone, you know, on the board or something could advise them. I mean, obviously they need a career coach to help them because it's just not tenable and really shouldn't be tolerated.
So if let's say there's one small step that any leader could take tomorrow to start building a safer and more respectful work environment, what would that be from the point of view for the leader?
I would spend a lot of time with my direct reports, especially in the first 90 days of taking a role on. It's a wonderful opportunity to ask them, what are their goals and aspirations? Do they want to become a CIO someday? If the answer is yes, then I'll put them in an acting CIO role when I go on vacation. Um, do they want to be deep uh, technical skills? Well, I need those too, so I'll help you get the training you need and support that. Um, but just asking what's working well and what could be done differently. When I started at the university, I had a troubled organization, 330 people in central IT, and the prior leadership, their mantra was there's no budget, there's no budget, there's no budget. So people stopped bringing ideas to improve. And the reality is there are millions of dollars in the budget. It's how it's prioritized. And um, and then the leadership rewarded heroics and fire drills instead of proactive customer service. So I worked with my leadership team to articulate with our customers on campus what did they want from us as an organization. And our values were they wanted truthfulness, transparency, they wanted consistency, they wanted us as leaders to care about their family. They were not at the university to make a lot of money. They were there to serve the students and faculty, which is a noble cause. But and I could promise an 8-hour day, where in industry they can't promise that. And then I would reinforce those values through multi-channels. So no one joined the organization without going through the monthly orientation. Oh, a couple of them would try to sneak off and, they're too busy to do it, but I'd find them and get them into the next one. And then they got to meet with my direct reports and hear about all the projects we're working on. And we'd talk about the values. And no one could go work for us without understanding the values of the organization. At our quarterly meetings, which were both in person and hybrid, We'd talk about the values. We'd invite our customers in to share stories of how they've been helped by our organization. And um, I wrote a blog once a week for 8 years and reinforced the values, talk about projects that were coming up. We had implemented a new learning management system that took 2 years to implement because 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, it takes a while. Um, I worked with a peer of mine, the vice provost, um, to select a new learning management system. The old one was clunky and 90s technology, and the students and faculty said it was clunky and slow. Well, the students and faculty picked the new learning management system, and then my organization worked with Vice Provost organization, who had a Center for Teaching and Learning, and we helped all these departments move to the new learning management system. But we shared those with all our staff. So even if you're a network engineer, you heard about the learning management system. Even if you're uh, someone who helps uh, faculty in the classroom technology, you heard about moving to voice over IP. And so, there's a lot of sharing of ideas.
We're speaking with Brad Englert, the author of the book Spheres of Influence: How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationships. It is an Amazon bestseller in three key business categories. And I want to also touch on relationships with customers because that's also a part of your book. Now, how would you go about understanding your customers' goals, Brad, and their aspirations if they don't articulate them clearly?
Well, it needs to be a dialogue. And uh, sometimes people aren't sure what they want, and you need to help them talk through it. And I would find once in a while I was not able to help them, but I knew people who could help them. So sometimes it's just connecting and helping them be successful, even though, it's not helping you directly, will pay off over time. And they'll remember that. And there might be an opportunity later where you can work with them. I asked all my direct reports to meet with their peers across their peer customers across the university. So I had 7 direct reports. They all met with 7 to 8 peers once a month or every 6 weeks. And they got feedback on, okay, what's working well? What could we do better? Do you have any issues? And then I would do the same. I would meet with 7 to 10 peers of mine, the vice president for public safety, vice president for facilities. Um, let's talk about public safety. We knew it would be a matter of if there'd be a problem, and we needed to know we'd be prepared for when there's a problem. And we had a bomb scare, we had a murder, we had a shooting. Our teams worked together to anticipate those act critical moments. And so the one time we had a bomb scare, I was actually out on the mall with just my phone. So not near a computer, don't have any, it's like they wouldn't let me be in the building because it was a bomb scare. But we had a standing operating procedure where my peer and I would get on a conference call with his direct reports and my direct reports, and we would connect into the leadership team at the Emergency Management Center. And we actually worked the bomb scare from the mall on a mobile phone. And then once a year, we would get together, both organizations, and say, what if there was a cyber attack? What would we do if the power went out? What would we do if a hurricane came and tornadoes knocked out the data center? And yeah, we learned something every time that you just have to be ready. A year after we practiced the power outage, the power went out. It hadn't gone out in 20 years. We generate our own power. It's backed up by another utility. Both failed, but we had practiced that. And of course, we have generators and things for that situation. One time, my peer, vice president of public safety, called and said, Brad, I heard a rumor, which was really helpful because it's nice to know what the rumors are. And he goes, I heard that you don't have enough diesel in the generators. I said, well, that's a great rumor. I'll go check. Well, it turns out we topped up the diesel every month, had a contract to do that. Once a year, we flushed them out and replaced all the diesel, and we tested it. So it was a good rumor, but it just wasn't true. And he was able to get back to his person and say, it's okay. Now, if I didn't have that two-way communication, then that could have turned into an issue that really wasn't an issue. So I asked my direct reports to go meet with customers, and a woman who worked for me reminded me of this time when I directed her to go meet with this peer of hers who hated us. Well, she hated us because there was some bad behavior in the past, and her boss didn't trust us either. And so I directed her to go meet with her, and I said, I'd rather have them in the tent working with us and outside the tent throwing rocks at us. And, after 7 or 8 months, as we got better, more consistent, more customer focused and proactive, and apologizing when we screwed up, that person became an advocate for us. And her boss became an advocate. And they kind of forgave all the past transgressions and, gave us a fresh start. And we worked well together after that.
Well, now, Brad, I know at times when, let's say, you understood the customer's requests and you know what they're looking for. Um, and if you cannot provide that service, you let them know, well, I know another organization that can fulfill your needs. Let me refer you to them. But there are companies, organizations that won't do that. They might promise the customer something and not be able to deliver. So honesty is very important, obviously.
Mhm.
Again, there are companies out there that may not be honest and will try to not lose that sale, not lose that potential customer, and try to sell them something that is not what they wanted. That normally leads to bad consequences, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. So I had a chief information officer call me into his office, fairly large organization, transportation agency, and he wanted a payroll system in 90 days. Well, my experience is implementing payroll systems and accounting systems, and there's no way you can do that in 90 days. But I just, listened to him, and what some firms would do is say, yeah, I can do it. And then once you get in the door, do a change order and change it up and turn it into a year project. But that wasn't my style. It's not truthful. So I just got up on the whiteboard and said, okay, you need 1 month to get the equipment, get the software. Okay. You need another month to test everything, make sure it works. And, every pay stub needs to compare new system, old system, every line. So that takes a month at least. I said, when are we going to convert the data? And there, of course, there's no time to convert the data. And he just turned beet red and threw me out of the office. And I was down on the street, just kind of shaking my head. And it's like, you know, I'm glad I'm not working for them because that's not tenable. Well, sure enough, he hired another firm. I'm sure they just nodded yes to the 90 days. And I'm sure they tried to change the scope and schedule once they got in. But after they were behind, 6 months behind, both the CIO and the consultant were fired. So, yeah, they signed up for it, but they were signing up, one, that couldn't be done. So the CIO should have known better. But two, they shouldn't have, the consultant shouldn't agreed to try to do it.
The key is to be honest and basically, don't promise, but under deliver. And that's a great story right there, Brad. We're speaking with Brad Englert, the author of Spheres of Influence, How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationships. It's an Amazon bestseller in three key business categories. And Brad, in the book, you mentioned internal spheres of influence that would be building strong relationships within your organization, and
Mhm.
also external spheres of influence that will be developing key relationships outside of the organization. I want to go back to the internal sphere of influence, and you mentioned something about leveraging mentorship. To
Hmm.
strengthen your internal network. I think when we hear the word networking, we have ideas about that. But what's your advice as far as leveraging mentorship for a young professional?
Well, if you don't have a mentor, you need to find one. Um, if you're in a management role, you can be a mentor. I expected my leadership team to mentor their staff, and I would try to model that behavior with them so they knew what it looked like. A good example is I would have a section in my office of business books that I thought might help people in different situations. And one of those books was Managing Expectations by the psychologist who was in IT. And she's the one who taught me just say, whoa. Well, if I was helping mentor someone and how to manage expectations, I'd give them a copy of the book and said, this is not War and Peace. This is a really easy read, has cartoon figures in it, but read this book. Another would be Stephen Covey, The Seven Habits, the importance of working with people, building an emotional bank account, and going to training, what she refers to as sharpen the saw. There's the story was I'm too busy cutting the tree down to sharpen the saw. Well, maybe you need to stop and sharpen the saw. So, it's you need to be strategic and intentional of who you're building these relationships with. Same thing with customers. Not all customers are created equal. Um, and I'm a believer in customers not always right. So, you just have back to your honesty point. That's how you build trust.
And I'm sure that one aspect of this is like, you go to a networking event and you exchange business cards. It's superficial, and you might get a phone call the following week from someone that you met at the event asking you for a donation or something, even though you you don't know that person.
That actually happened to me. Yeah, a week later, I get a call from this person. It's like, who? I don't even know you. He wanted me to donate to his not-for-profit. It's like, you know, I don't think so.
All right, we are speaking with Brad Englert. The book is titled Spheres of Influence: How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationships. And of course, Brad, we can pick up the book on Amazon and other online bookstores. But
Mhm.
how can we keep up with your latest happenings?
Sure. Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so that's an easy way. Happy to connect with whoever's interested in these ideas. Also, I'm going to send you a link to my website after this that you can put in the show notes, which will have one tab for a free sample of the book, a second tab to how to buy the book, and there's an ebook and audiobook too. And then third tab, how to schedule time on my calendar.
That's outstanding. We'll have that on our show notes for sure, Brad. Again, we're talking with Brad Englert, the founder of Brad Englert Advisory and the author of Spheres of Influence. It is a book published by Fast Company Press. It's an Amazon bestseller in three key business categories and a must read for emerging leaders looking to develop the skill of building effective, enduring business relationships, both within and outside the organizations. So
Mhm.
thank you so much, Brad, for hopping on the podcast, and best of luck with your book.
No, thank you. I enjoyed it.